Yo, this is the Scarcity Studios YouTube channel. Please don't forget to like, comment, share and subscribe. And our sponsors are Alpha Claims and Hire Birmingham, the leading and best accident management company. Get a replacement car anywhere in 1 hour. I really appreciate you joining me today, and this first episode is about London street news, and we've got some news from Manchester coming up later today. This breaking news story coming from the Metropolitan Police says that 2 men have been arrested and 80 kilos of cocaine has been discovered in what police describe as a proactive investigation in the Colindale area of London. On Thursday, the 6th of May, officers from the Specialist Crime Command, as part of an operation carried out in Arctic House, Colindale, a 41-year-old male was arrested outside the building in possession of 1 kilo of cocaine. Officers then gained entry to the address inside Arctic House, and on searching the address they found a further 80 kilos and 400 grand in cash. A second man aged 29 years old was arrested after being found outside the address. Both men were arrested on conspiracy to supply Class A drugs and remain in custody. Police say this is a significant seizure of Class A drugs, and this would have undoubtedly made its way to the communities of London and also affected the violence that gangs bring. They must have had some intelligence by catching the guy outside with the 1 kilogram of cocaine. That gives a reasonable cause for them to enter the property, because the police can't just run into any property for no reason. They have to have a reasonable amount of evidence, and this was clearly what they believed was a safe house. And even with the exaggerated figures that the police come out with in relation to kilos of cocaine, this would have been a hell of a lot of cocaine. So even on the low end of retail prices, 40,000 or under, you're still talking nearly £500,000 worth of drugs. And this is one of many big seizures that we've seen during lockdown and as we come out of lockdown as well. So we'll definitely keep you updated about any trial that comes from that story. In some other news from London as well, police have released body cam footage of the moment they arrested a man with a Scorpion submachine gun. These have become very popular on the streets of London and all over the UK. Police say this was an operation named Eli, and it's aimed to clamp down on illegal guns. Operation Eli stops criminals accessing firearms and prevents an increase in shootings. Similar to what they seen in London last year and the first lockdown, they did a series of raids where they recovered a lot of guns, and they believed this would have a massive effect. This operation was launched 8 weeks ago, and Operation Eli's officers acted quickly and robustly in response to intelligence about illegal firearms in circulation. Officers said they've already seized 40 firearms in the capital in this operation, building an extremely successful year of gun seizures for the Met last year. Commander Dave McLaren from the Specialist Crime Command, when the restrictions were lifted last July, sadly we've seen the highest volume of firearm discharges since 2018. As we move out of lockdown again, we will be working hard to prevent this from happening in the city. The Met has thousands of dedicated officers whose job it is to take guns off the street, and they say they're working closely with their London colleagues to make it one of the safest cities in the world. Operation Eli is adding that capacity, they said, and never before has the organisation worked so hard to tackle gun crime and take them off the street. Operation Eli started on the 8th of March, and it brings together several different units from the Metropolitan Police. Their operation involves Viper teams and is supported by armed police and officers from the Territorial Support Group. They operate based on intelligence and patrol areas that stand the best chance of disrupting gang activity and guns making it to the hands of criminals. They said in 2019 a total of 368 firearms were lethally discharged in the city, and that increased to 443, an increase of 74 firearms this year alone. They say they've seized 121 firearms capable of firing, and this included Scorpion submachine guns. They arrested Lahore, who is 19 years old, from Ealing in the early hours of Monday the 2nd of March. He was arrested by firearms officers from the Crime Command near Chiswick Park train station, and in his backpack they found 2 Scorpion submachine guns and 40 rounds of ammunition. Appearing at Snaresbrook Crown Court on the 22nd of April, he pled guilty to 2 counts of possession of weapons with intent to endanger life and also ammunition. He said he was transporting for the weapons for somebody else to pay off a debt, and he is due to appear in court on Friday the 4th of June for sentencing. There's been a 20% increase since last year in firearm discharges in London. And to see how some of these guns are used is a perfect example with this next story. Stephen Ifield has been jailed after a series of robberies in Redbridge, East London. He walked into 2 banks and post offices with a firearm, and he's been jailed at Snaresbrook Crown Court and sentenced to 16 years in prison. Following a 2-week trial in January, Ilford was found guilty of 2 counts of robbery, 1 count of attempted robbery, and 3 counts of possession of an imitation firearm. So between 7th of October and the 7th of November 2019, he targeted the banks in Gants Hill and the Wanstead area. On 2 occasions, he produced what police believed to be an imitation gun to the staff, and it appeared genuine. On the 3rd occasion, he used a walking stick, and he concealed it under a carrier bag and held it as if he was carrying a shotgun. He pointed the weapons at staff members and made them give him money. At the banks, Ilford stole cash and stuffed it in his pocket before he left with £3,200 and £1,300 from the other. He robbed the post office, but the staff refused to open the till, and they told him that it was on a time lock. Detectives identified him after tracing his route and seeing that he fled back to the scene of each robbery. By following CCTV footage, they was able to place him at each raid at the time that the raids took place. And they say that he had a long history of offending, and one of his offences was a previous armed robbery. And so this goes to show that it doesn't matter how old you get, sometimes people will never grow out of getting involved in crime. So this guy's going to prison for the best part of 16 years for £4,000. And that really does make you wonder about the risks that you take when it comes to crimes like this. So I really hope he sorts his life out when he comes out of prison and makes the best of his situation. In other news coming from London, on Harrow Road in West London, police have been deploying knife arches. These are metal detectors that are randomly put up in the street to actually just stop and search anybody. A woman that is filming it has raised a lot of controversy. There's been a mixed response on our social medias about this woman's response to the knife arches. She questions the human right aspect of searching anybody for any reason. And the police tell her that this is not a compulsory stop and search. This is voluntary. But of course, if somebody refused it, I'm not sure what the consequences for that would be.
I don't know if the police have anything else better to do, but they have got a metal detector up, which is an infringement on everyone's civil liberty. And what are they going to do when someone goes through it? No, you can't do that. This is all right at a festival or something, but not on a public pathway. You have no right to do that. You have no right at all to do that.
We're not going to ask anyone to do it if they don't want to do it.
Well, how can you tell them that you're not going to ask them? Because it's right in the middle of the pathway. It's not like they have a no.
We're going to have a conversation about it.
I don't want a conversation, really and truly.
About the recent rise in knife crime.
Knife crime is all over the place. It's not just in West London.
We're doing our bit over here for this.
There is absolutely no news coverage on this whatsoever. There's no article that is recent. So I had to do some digging, and I found that there was a Freedom of Information request made in 2019. This is the last time that the police in London used knife arches. And Mr. Pablos asked them what the number of pop-up metal detectors that had been deployed in the city in the last year was. And the Freedom of Information request said that these are not monitored centrally. The second question that he asked was, what is the legal basis for the deployment that was carried out? And the response to that was, there are no central records kept. It is impossible to comment on each deployment. The third question he asked is there a legal basis and any information given to the public for their participation in the scan that is optional? They said there are no records kept again for this information. And the fourth question he asked, what is the number of people attempting to avoid or opt out of the detector? And they reply back with these figures are not recorded. He goes on to ask two other questions, like the number of knives that are seized from these detectors and the number of convictions from knives seized via these detectors. And again, they don't have any records for them numbers. So it is very unhelpful, and we've got very little information available about what the effectiveness of these knife arches are. An article by the Daily Mail back in 2019 said the knife arches were deployed in central London at the time to try to cut down on knife crime in the local area. And pedestrians were forced to walk through it if they wanted to go down an alleyway. Those who were seen turning away from the device were stopped and searched by plainclothes officers. So as they said before, they're not going to force anybody to take part in it. But if you refuse, or if you show that you're not interested, then that will be reasonable cause for them to search you. And that is where I think the human rights aspect is being questioned. Of course, the vast majority of people are glad that something is being done to combat knife crime in London. The chief of police at the time said the idea is to show the community that we are responding to their concerns around knife crime, and we would do whatever we can to detect and prevent it. They said that they like the fact that it's a narrow alleyway because anybody that turns to walk away will automatically raise suspicion. The Home Secretary at the time, Sajid Javid, said due to the amount of knife crime attacks in the city, we've had to increase our proactive operations. So I thought these were really interesting stories and updates coming from London, and I really want to hear what people have to say on all of the stories featured. Please don't forget to follow us online as well at Scarcity Studios. And I'll be back again very shortly with some more news. Peace.
Hopefully catch people trying to come through here today carrying a knife. And really the beauty of this in this narrow alleyway is we will see those that turn around and try to walk the other way, and we have plainclothes officers at each end who will pick up on what we call the turnarounds. We've been going about 40 minutes and we've already detained 3 people, not for knives unfortunately, but for possession of drugs. So it's very much about looking at people when they see this knife arch and they see these officers, looking at how they are going to respond, whether they're going to turn around and walk the other way.